Isn't it astonishing that you can take a group of people who've walked in off the street randomly or driven long distance, and in a matter of seconds, you can change their entire mood, their sense of who it is to be alive, how it is to be alive, just by a few notes of Bach.
With a little bit help of Bach, yeah.
I mean, Bach can do that. Yeah. You know, Casals, the great Spanish cellist, began every morning of his life, without fail, sitting at the piano, playing Bach. That's how he began. Some people say a prayer, some people go to the gym, and he played Bach. It's a great way of starting. You're a wonderful musician, and it's a real pleasure to listen to you, and I've almost nothing to say to you other than what a pleasure it is to hear you play. Very thoughtful playing. One thing I recommend, and I don't care how long it takes you, tune carefully.
Yeah, sure. I think changed the strings last night.
Right, yeah, all of those things. So don't arrive late, all those things. This is a real wake-up call for you, because it's a great privilege for you to have these extraordinary people. They've come a long way to hear you, and get there early, an hour early. The harpist of the Boston Philharmonic arrives 1 hour before every rehearsal to tune, to make sure. So you knew it was out of tune, and they knew it was out of tune, and they suffered for you, and you suffered. So eliminate that from your life for the rest of your life, all right? Never get into a position of playing when the instrument is out of tune, whatever it takes. Okay, that's the first thing. End of that story. The genius of Bach's music is that it's played on one instrument, but there are many instruments present. And there's a cellist playing, and you don't play the bass as if you were an individual bass player or cello player, with that kind of attention and presence and specialness. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, since it's a plucked instrument, the danger is that it becomes vertical. You know that, and you're making lines. But if you were playing the flute, it would be easier. Right? So if you can think of those two things, and they're like this, they're different things. Right? One of them is going whoa for the bass, and the other's could you do a little bit more of that and tune the instrument before we go? I attended some rehearsals of Celibidache. Who knows the name Celibidache? Very few people. Wow. Celibidache was one of the greatest conductors the world ever had, and from Romania, and he was the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic after the war. When Furtwängler was no longer, he became the conductor, and he's a very great. He demanded enormous amounts of rehearsal. Scandalous amounts of rehearsal, jealous-making amounts of rehearsal. And I heard him tune the London Symphony Orchestra. He spent 15 minutes tuning the bass section. 15 minutes. Imagine what that cost. He wouldn't. No. He went on and on and on. And they complained bitterly, but then they told me, the colleagues, they said, we've never sounded this well in tune. All right, beautiful. Here we go. Okay. Imagine you were Yo-Yo Ma for a brief moment, right? Just play that note like Yo-Yo plays it, yeah. No, it can be more beautiful. It doesn't need to be loud. It's launching. It's like launching a journey, or the pillar for a building, a huge arc. It's going to go all the way from here right to the end of the piece. Ooh, that's better. Imagine you wanted to sell your guitar and sell it for more than you paid for it. Actually, more than it was worth. All right, and it all depended on that note. Just right. Yes, I'll give you a little extra. Yeah, a little extra. Still more. Yeah, that's coming. Ooh. Look, see, look, just, oh, she went like that. Like that. That's it. That's your job, is to make that face come alive. It's not difficult with this particular face. Okay, here we go. Right. Now the secret for the flute is to make this one line. And where is it going? It's going to there. This. You see, that's the purpose of this line, is to get back to that bass note. Try it again. Yes. Now, it goes each time to D, and then back to D, and then back to D. By now, the audience is saying, does he have any other notes? And then he says, yes, I have this D. Right. And then I'm going to go to the C sharp. That's going to be a real event. But it's all about the bass note. And make each one come alive. Here we go, 3 and 2 D and G, C, to B, and now to A. That's an important one because that's the dominant. So all of that is moving to the dominant. Right? Now we're beginning to get a feel of a shape. Isn't that exciting? It's really beautiful. So let's try it again. Don't make too much. Only take as much time as the music calls for. Don't put your own timing. Find out the timing of the music. Do you see what I mean?
Sure.
In other words, you took a lot of time for this D, but it's just another D.
Mm-hmm.
The C sharp, on the other hand, is a surprise. So whenever you're surprised by the music, either because of the harmony or the dynamics or something, then you take time. Otherwise, move. Here we go. 3 and D. Yes. 2 D. Now 2 D. Another D. 2 C. 2 B. 2 A. 2 A. And now again 2 C, 2 G, 2 G. Yeah, when you're playing these notes, think like a cellist.
Okay.
It's beautiful. If you thought of them less individual,
So having no break in mind.
D, that's right. Keep the line going. 2 D, and then 2 C. Good. If you could think in your mind, 2 D, 2 C, 2 B, then it'll give you a longer line. That's very good. And yeah, can you avoid D, da, do, D, and more? Do, D, da, D, do, D, D, do, D, da, do, D, to there, and now goes to there, and back to B, back to B, again to B, to A, to G sharp, to C, and now to F. Like a flute. you expected, right?
Yeah.
You expected B natural there. And you have to create some real surprise there because we were all shocked by that. Bach was shocked himself. He couldn't believe it. He said, did I really write that? Okay, beautiful. You're doing great. We're following the line beautifully from here, D. You know what I would suggest? Just before it, take a little time in these three eighth notes. Okay. Right? I wouldn't suggest you do it by playing loudly. Do it all with timing, right? Because otherwise
How would you phrase that?
Sorry?
How would you phrase that?
Just a tiny little bit of time. That's all. If you play it loudly, it's like hitting somebody over the head with it. You don't need to because they're very subtle listeners. They're totally tuned into you now. Totally. They're hearing everything you're doing and they're loving it. So here, from here. You could raise your eyebrows. You go. That was a little too much. Right? The thing is, once you've discovered something, you actually don't need to do anything anymore. Because now you're so surprised by that B flat that every time you play it for the rest of your life, you'll do something special. But without doing too much. Right? It's beautiful. Do it once again. Here. Yeah, if you have something like that, make sure that right at the end you take time, right? Because that chord, we've been waiting for that moment of stop, and now we're going to find out something new. So one more time, and do something you've never done before. Always do something new. Even if you're doing the same thing, make it new. Do you understand what I'm saying? Just some.
That's what artists like.
Right. That, otherwise, you're just repeating. Here we go. Now, just to say, when you stand up to receive the applause, be with them the way that they are being with you, right? They're feeling gratitude, joy, amazement, admiration, love. I was in India yesterday morning, and I arrived yesterday evening, and I wanted to share something with you which I haven't talked about in the class at all yet. But I gave a talk to 600 Indian business people, and I was on top form. I gave everything I had, and I was full of passion and intensity and excitement and drive, and the Indian audience was completely passive. They didn't laugh, they didn't participate, and I got really kind of upset about it, because the more I gave, the less they did. And I would say something very funny, no. And I got so frustrated with this experience, and I didn't quite understand it. And I went back up to my hotel room, and after it was over, and I called Roz, my partner, and I said, Roz, it was terrible. They didn't respond at all, and didn't seem to get it, and there was no... Well, all right, so that's, you can't win them all, as they say, right? So then I went to the party, to the dinner party afterwards, and when I came down, they greeted me, they said it was wonderful, and they were so expressive, and they were passionate, and they hugged me, and they cried and laughed, and said it changed their lives. And I said, well, why didn't you do that in the corporate culture? They said, as long as the director is there, the head of the company, they're not allowed to express any emotion. So I thought about that. And then I thought about something which we don't talk a lot about, which is the art of listening. The art of listening. Because we talk here about the art of performing, but we don't talk about the art of receiving what is being given. And I think it's worth spending some thought about that, because if we don't respond, it's a two-way conversation between the performer and the speaker. And it's a love relationship, actually. And if we don't develop that and think about that and see ourselves as participants, as actually an essential part of the relationship of the performance, we're missing out on a tremendously important part of music. And so you might give some thought to that as you're listening to who you are being for the performer, and something which you probably don't realize. Now, most of our young musicians are brought up to think of the audience as the enemy. Right? Is that right? They're the people who are critical, they want you to make a mistake, they hope you're not as good as their friend who's playing next, and all of that. Actually, it's not the case. The audience is the friend, the lover of the performer, and they want you to play fantastically, and they want you to do the best you can do. And the way you know that is because they're expressing that on their faces.
It's that spark.
Right, it's that spark, exactly. So that's something that came home to me, and I talked to a lot of people in India about this, and they kind of apologized to me about this. They said, this is the way we're brought up. I said, well, let's stop that.
So let's try. You applaud again.
And now, wonderful. So, I can't imagine a better way of starting this class than being with you and having you play this music. Thank you. You're a beautiful musician. Wonderful. Great. Lovely. Great.
Wow.